So I lost my joy and I found it difficult to come to church. I found it difficult to read the Bible. I found it difficult to connect with God, and found it really difficult to even pray. And it was a big shock for me because I've never in all my years of ministry been in this kind of dark place with church and with God. And those who know me well know that I've been in ministry a long time, that I've been involved in helping churches, that I was in leadership in our own church, and the job I had was a big job leading loads of Christian volunteers around London and the southeast, and was developing prayer for the organisation that I was working with. So I was full on in ministry and in mission. I was travelling overseas. I was travelling all over the UK and on a mission for God, and knew that I was called by God to do what I was doing. And then the redundancy was like a carpet being ripped from under my feet, and it was like, well, God, I thought you'd called me to do this. I thought this is what you wanted, and I know it is what he wanted, and I've never really got to the bottom of why he allowed the redundancy so fast and so unexpectedly. Anyway, I won't go into all the details here, but I grieved a lot. The volunteers, the only reason they didn't leave the organisation was because I asked them not to leave the organisation. I missed them, they missed me. I missed my job. I missed the churches I worked with. I missed the overseas teams. So the redundancy wasn't just about me losing my job. It was me losing my calling. It was me just losing relationships on so many levels. And it was also grieving the loss of what others felt for me. So yeah, it was a difficult time. And on top of that, as I say, I had family issues going on as well. God was incredibly gracious in this last year. He let me grieve. And sometimes I was able to come to church, and other times I just couldn't face coming to church. And sometimes I was able to say very short, very small prayers. I always knew God was there, and I never for 1 minute thought he wasn't there, but I couldn't feel him anymore, and I found it difficult to pray with others. David and Sue have been very patient and brilliant at just quietly being alongside me while I was going through this, and still am in some ways going through it. But I felt in the last few weeks something shifted. God asked me to do some work for him on the level of counselling, and I just didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to go back to that job, and found it really difficult to go back to something I'd already done before. I'm quite a pioneering sort of person. I like starting up new things, but also I'm someone who is quite broad in ministry. I love being out there travelling. I love being out on a global scale. So this was, I felt like I was being put back inside a matchbox when I'd been out in sort of completely what felt like freedom. And so the joy in ministry wasn't there, and I was doing the work that God asked me to do. Every day I'd get up and I would make myself write the emails I needed to write, get the things ready I needed to get ready, but there was no joy in it. And so I went to God and said, even Jesus, went to the cross, it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And so even in going to the cross, Jesus had an inner joy. He was able to be obedient unto death because he had this joy. And I was saying, God, where is the joy? Where is the joy in this? Surely when you ask us to do something and you give us a calling, we can get excited about it, but there was no excitement here. And so I wondered about that. And then one day I was clearing out my office, this shed, and found some more papers from my previous role, which brought up some more pain, and I was able to throw those away and just realised that over the year God was, or had been, healing me and had been ministering to me. And as I threw these papers away and as I let go of what I thought would bring me happiness, as so often I would say, I just want my old job back. As I let go of that, as I said, okay, God, whatever, I'm just going to follow you into this new calling no matter what. As I let go of what I wanted and completely gave myself to what God wanted, I slowly felt the joy return and realised that this kind of joy hasn't got anything to do with liking what you do. It hasn't got anything to do with enjoying yourself. This kind of joy is on a new level. It's a joy that comes despite the job being tough, despite the job being something you don't really want to do, but the joy of knowing that God is in it is a completely different kind of joy. The joy of knowing that God is doing something and he's asked me to partner with him in it. And so that joy is simply knowing that I am doing something with God, whether I like doing it or not. But the joy is there because I love God. And I'm doing something with God because I love him. And so the joy has slowly been returning. I'd say it's not there 100% yet. I'm learning to walk in a new way. I'm learning to be obedient to a place where I'm able to be obedient even when it's not fun. It wasn't fun for Jesus to go to the cross. It wasn't enjoyable for him to go to the cross. It was painful and it was difficult, and he was abandoned and he was hurt and he was damaged in so many ways. The Bible says that he was not recognizable. That's how damaged he was. And yet it says that for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. So what is that joy? So that joy is also seeing people come into a greater place of freedom. So God has asked me to help churches set up counselling centres. And that sounds very grand, and I sound perhaps like a spoiled brat for complaining. But the job itself doesn't bring me joy. What brings me joy is that God is showing me what he wants to do with it. And so I'm able to lay down my own desires, the things I want and the things that I like, and take up my cross and follow him. I hope that this in some way encourages you to be obedient even when we don't feel like being obedient, to do the things that God is asking us to do even when they are not pleasant. And if you're not feeling the joy, then ask him to show you where that joy comes from, because it's not a joy that you get from enjoyment. It's a joy that only God can give. Thank you for listening. Bye.